Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my channel. Today, we're going to be looking at second chance romance book recommendations if you are interested in that particular trope. Because I read primarily romance books these days, I was looking to see if I could do a series on different tropes and the books that I've read involving said tropes. Bear in mind, I haven't read a vast amount of romance books, but I feel like I've read enough that I can do individual trope recommendations. So the first video in the series, which is this one, we'll be talking about all the second chance romance books that I've read over the course of, I believe, about 3-4 years. So stay tuned. In preparation for doing this video, I was thinking about what people consider second chance romance to be. And I know that in many places, people consider second chance romances to be like they've dated before, they broke up, and now they're trying to see if they have another chance at a relationship. Whereas I think slightly differently. So for me, a second chance romance would be if, like I've said previously, they've been in a relationship before, they broke up for whatever reason, and now they're coming together to see if they have a chance. But I also consider second chance romance to be if they've had a previous non platonic relationship. So, what I mean by that is if they've had maybe a sexual relationship. So, let's say if they were like friends with benefits, for instance, and then they took a break from that, and then now they're coming back to see if they have a chance at a real relationship. I also consider it if maybe they weren't friends with benefits, they never officially dated, but one or both of them had romantic feelings towards the other person, then I also consider that a second chance romance. You know that trope of we've been dating all this time, but neither of us realized it. And like everybody around us could see we were in a relationship besides us. That kind of trope, I also consider that to be second chance romance worthy. Let me know your thoughts. What do you consider to be second chance? Are you strictly in the box of they must have dated before, broken up, and now they're getting back together? Or are your parameters a bit wider like mine? Let me know what you think. The first book on this list is called You Deserve Each Other by Sarah Hogle, and it's about this couple called Naomi and Nicholas, and they're actually engaged, but they've realized that they're both dissatisfied with their relationship and they're constantly fighting. But the catch is whoever calls off the wedding is going to be the one who foots the bill, and this is like in the lead up to their wedding. So they've put like plans together, like deposits. The wedding is pretty much fully planned and paid for, and so it's a big risk. Naomi, because she doesn't have a job that pays very much, so for her, it would truly and honestly be a huge financial burden. Nicholas comes from a well off family, so even though for him it would still be quite a significant amount of money, it wouldn't be the same as it would be for Naomi because his family can essentially pick up the bill. And he comes from one of those like society sort of families. What they're about to have is a society wedding. And so there are all these people that are being invited, and not only will it reflect poorly on them, but it will also reflect poorly on their families, but in particular Nicholas's family. So it's all very complicated. The reason why I loved this book is that, if I'm not mistaken, this was the very first second chance romance that I read. And I really enjoyed it because even though it was packed full of emotional depth, it was extremely funny. So it was told entirely in Naomi's perspective. And she is really funny. Like her thought processes, the way that she comes to her conclusions, like the assumptions she makes. She's a very funny protagonist. So I enjoyed being in her head because she really and truly made me laugh. I also really liked the fact that it wasn't all doom and gloom, because I feel like in real life, if you're at that stage where you're questioning whether or not you'd like to marry somebody that you've been in a relationship with and you've put in all this effort to make the relationship work and you've moved in together and you have all these lofty plans, it might feel a bit gloomy, and it probably is. But this book has a bit of levity in the sense that this book basically focuses on each of them doing their very best to make the other person call off the wedding. So it has a very jokey, very funny premise. And even though there were serious moments where they would really get into it with each other and it was very emotionally heart wrenching at times, it was still a really, really funny book. So it was more like a rom com, if you ask me. So I think if you're looking for something that has in equal measure both emotional depth, but you're also looking for something that has levity and can make you laugh and can distract you from everyday life. Maybe if you're going through this yourself, you may not get the same thing. But if you're looking for something to provide that much needed distraction, I think this is a perfect book. I really, really enjoyed it. I think I rated it a 5 star at the time, and this was a few years ago. So I don't know if it would still be a 5 star for me, but I don't think it would be anything lower than a 4 star. I thought it was brilliant at the time, and I really, really enjoyed it. There were also so many discussions that I really liked in the book. There was discussion about when you try so hard to be a picture perfect couple that your efforts are now geared towards how people view you externally rather than putting effort into your relationship internally and then letting that effort like shine through. They were more so trying to do things in a way that pleased people who wouldn't be in a relationship, so from the outsider's view. I also love the conversation about people in a mixed financial situation, because if I'm not mistaken, Nicholas was a dentist, so he does well for himself. I can't remember what Naomi did actually. What was Naomi? I think she worked in a store or something. So she didn't make a huge amount of money. So I loved how there were discussions about the repercussions of, maybe not say the repercussions, but like the reality of not making as much money as your partner, and how that can at times make you feel trapped and potentially make you make decisions that you don't want to make, especially if your family financially depends on you. I thought Nicholas was very sweet, and I did understand where he was coming from. I would have loved to read in his POV because he had a very complicated relationship with his parents. His dad is a boy mom in that way, blink twice if you need help kind of way. And his dad is very passive. So he has a very hard time balancing pleasing Naomi and pleasing his mother. So he's stuck in that limbo of trying to appease both sides, even though both sides have issues. And it's not necessarily even Naomi, because Naomi is fine, but it's his mom. She's overbearing. She thinks she's the only woman in his life. She struggles to accept another woman coming into his life and stealing away his attention. She's extremely concerned with how people view her on the outside. So there's a lot of complicated family dynamics and interpersonal dynamics that play a role in this book. It also talks about Naomi not particularly feeling satisfied in her job. So on top of everything that I've talked about, this, she's also dealing with being in between jobs and not particularly having the prospects that she wants. This book, even though it feels very much like an escape, it did feel very real. These are things that real couples would probably encounter in their everyday life. The balance of everything was pretty good. And I think that if you're looking for a rom-com that has like focuses on real couple drama, but is so funny and light and enjoyable, I would definitely recommend this book. Next, we have Tommy Cabot Was Here by Sebastian. This is not a full book. This is a short story involving Tommy and Everett. So they attended the same boarding school growing up, and they would fool around in boarding school. But I'm sure at the time, because this book takes place in 1950s Massachusetts, and so at the time that they would have been going to boarding school, they would have had no future. Queer people at the time wouldn't have been able to see a future with a partner of the same gender. And so they go their separate ways after boarding school and they lose touch. And so Everett, goes off to England, goes to school. And then Tommy comes from a political family. And I would say the real life version of the Cabots would be like the Kennedys. It's a very dynastic feel to the family. And so Tommy goes on to become a politician. He gets married. He has a son. And so he's dropping his son off at the same boarding school that he went to. And he runs into Everett, who is a mathematician and works at the school. And all of those feelings come back. They were best friends. And obviously, they had physical elements to their relationship, but they really did love each other. And the only reason why they would have separated at the time is because they would have had no future. And so Everett seeing Tommy and Tommy seeing Everett brings back all the feelings that they had back to the surface. Tommy is also recently divorced as well. And Everett's just never really moved on. He never got married. He never had children or anything like that. And so when they meet again, they finally have this opportunity to explore a relationship in a way that they hadn't previously thought was possible. Obviously, they knew that they were attracted to each other, but now they're willing to admit the feelings that they have for one another. I love this book because it was very soft and sweet, because they were older men. And I don't really think I read a lot of romance books that involve older men. They would have probably been in their 40s, I believe. And so it's them coming back together and acknowledging the feelings that they have for each other. And it really tugs at your heartstring because, for one, Kat Sebastian is a brilliant writer. And I've talked about her before. I've talked about the fact that she is one of my favorite authors. She just knows how to write a book about two people who are just desperately in love with each other and don't know how to act or say otherwise. I really also loved the way that this book frames evolution, the way that this book frames love over the span of a significant amount of time, because there were really beautiful descriptions of how each of them looked quite different than how they would have looked back when they were in boarding school. But how loving somebody makes you appreciate the changes that you see, whether it's like gray hair or wrinkles or a different sort of body than what they would have had back when they were in school, or even emotions. Because I think Tommy was quite like debonair, quite charming, quite easy go lucky when they were in boarding school. But now, as a divorced middle aged man, he's now extremely emotional. He cries very easily, he's very easily moved. Almost like over the years, he's become quite tender hearted. And I just really love this book. In my opinion, it was too short, and I would have loved if it was a full book. This wasn't my first introduction to Cat Sebastian. I had already read We Could Be So Good and You Should Be So Lucky before, so I knew she was a capable writer. But this book was so unique because it was unlike anything I'd ever read before, and it just made me feel really warm. It's the kind of book that makes you feel warm and toasty, like the way you feel on a cozy night in. I love the relationship that Tommy has with his ex-wife. They get along extremely well despite being divorced and everything, and they co-parent their son Daniel really well. And she's very much a friend and a confidant to him, especially when it comes to Everett. He really went to her to discuss, how they would proceed. And I also love the acceptance of knowing that they're embarking on something completely different. They were both, as much as they had life experience, they were both completely new to navigating this kind of relationship. And I love that it really shined through. I typically find characters like Tommy and Everett a bit, shy, a bit reserved, a bit emotionally constipated, but still willing to evolve and try. I find them typically very charming. And so I absolutely love this book. And it would probably be in my top 5 second chance romance books. It was just so sweet, and I've read it a few times, and each time is better than the last. And so if you're into queer historical romance, this is the perfect book for that. Next on my list is the Bromance Book Club by Lyssa K. Adams, and it's the first in a series. I've not read the rest of the series, and I'm really looking to see if I can do that. But this is between Gavin and Thea. So they're a young couple, and they've recently had a big argument because Gavin finds out that Thea has been faking her orgasms for almost the entirety of their relationship, and so he feels very betrayed by it. And so they have a big argument. He moves out, and then they start embarking on being separated or like moving towards a divorce. But then Gavin realizes that he doesn't want a divorce, and so he tries his very best to see how he can fix their relationship before they have to get divorced, because they have 2 children and they want to keep their family together. And so it's all about them working together to build back what they've lost, or what they've not had the opportunity to build. Because so they meet each other, get together. Thea has a surprise pregnancy not too long after they start dating, and then they have twins. Gavin is an athlete, he plays baseball. So their lives are pretty full on because they've had this extremely quick whirlwind romance, courtship, children, marriage. He's an athlete, that kind of lifestyle. And so they haven't really had a chance to actually properly get to know each other. So this book is almost as if they start dating again. I've spoken many times about this at this point, but I love a book with strong male relationships in it. And the reason why it's called the Bromance Book Club is because Gavin and his teammates actually form a book club where they read different romance books in attempts to be better boyfriends and partners and husbands, which I think is a really cute premise, because they're like, we need to learn how to properly woo our women. And so they form this club to talk about all their ideas and all their problems, and to see how they can help each other in a group setting. So there's like a lot less judgment, and they can all like brainstorm with each other. There were so many funny moments between the guys and them helping him and showing him the errors of his ways, basically. It was really such a fun book. I've seen comments about people not liking Thea, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel very protective of a certain female protagonist, and I kind of feel that way about Thea, in the sense that I understand why she was unhappy. I understand why she felt the way she did. And I do think that if they had had better communication, they could have avoided a lot of their problems. But at the end of the day, I feel like what they experience as a couple is quite common in real life. And so I like the fact that this book felt very realistic. Thea's sister did kind of annoy me a little bit, but nothing too bad. I love their moments with their girls because they've got twin daughters. I had really cute like family moments. It's a second chance romance, but they're still married and they still have to co-parent because they have these children. So it was an interesting dynamic to add on to it. And there's also conversations about stuttering, because Gavin has a stutter. I love that it was part of the story because it shows where his insecurities come from. Because I like books that provide accurate backstories for each character, and it shows how his insecurities have manifested into the man that he was in the book, and why he shied away from certain topics, or maybe hasn't particularly paid attention to certain things. There was a lot of conversation about sex and pleasure, and the fact that you have to be consciously having sex with your partner. Like, you can't just be doing whatever because you think this is what they want or you think this is what you need. You actually need to be communicating with them. You both need to open up about what it is that you like and what gives you pleasure, and also exploration. It felt fresh in the sense that I hadn't read anything about it, because I feel like in romance books you read all about like these earth-shattering orgasms that characters have, but then this is about a couple who is not doing any of that. And I thought it was such an interesting premise for the book. So I really, really enjoyed it because of that. I love that it felt very, very real and very human. This book is basically the embodiment of if they wanted to, they would. If you're looking for a couple with an established family going through their problems, this is a perfect, perfect book for that. I definitely enjoyed it. So the next book on my list is Two Rogues Make a Ride by Kat Sebastian, and it's a part of her Seducing the Cedric series. It's the third book. It's between Martin and Will. So they have been best friends since childhood. They grew up in the same village, but they come from different walks of life, in the sense that Martin comes from an upper class family, so his father's like a landowner, and Will doesn't really come from that privilege of a background. I believe Will goes into the military and is placed under a very mean, evil, like, commander. I'm not the best at military terminology, but basically the person who was leading his, I suppose, regiment or something was mean and would physically abuse them and things. And so he has a bit of PTSD and he becomes an opium addict. And so he comes into a relationship with his own baggage. Martin has chronic illness and has been horribly treated by his father. It's actually a bit of a complicated relationship, because Martin's father did something horrendous to Will's brother. There's so many complicated layered dynamics. It's probably best you read the book before this one, just to get a full picture of what I'm talking about. And it's a historical romance set in England. And so basically, when they come together, it's because Will had been missing for a while. Because with addicts, it's like they go from place to place and they don't really have any stable homes or where to live. So Martin is looking for Will, essentially. With Martin and his chronic illness, it's best he stays in the countryside, because obviously, with the pollution of like the capital city and London, he doesn't really do well in places like that. And also, Martin's actually been living in his family's attic for months all by himself, because his father's passed away and he's had nobody else to look after him. And so he's just been living there. And then Will finds Martin in his family's attic after he had been living there for a while with nobody to look after him, bearing in mind that he does have a chronic illness. And so he begins to nurse him back to health. And then once Martin gains consciousness and they get talking, they realize that they've loved each other all their lives. And it's not a classic second chance romance, in the sense that they were never officially romantic, but they had always loved each other and they had always been best friends. And so for them, the story almost felt like a realization of what they had always known. It was just a book about patience and understanding, and just, this is what I would call unconditional love. They loved each other in spite of every stumbling block or every issue in their way. They just wanted to be together. And it was just so sweet and patient and kind. You know, when they say love is patient and love is kind, this is a book that fully embodies that. I love the talk about Martin. He had never felt anything romantic towards anyone, or even felt much of an attraction towards anyone except Will. He was very possessive of Will as well, like even before they had anything romantic going on. I think Will was the only consistent person in his life growing up, and so he feels very protective of the bond that they share. And not really in an unhealthy way, just, you know, when it's the one person you have and you're trying to make sure that they're always going to be in your corner, otherwise you're essentially alone. And so I just really like this book for that. It's a very caretaking based story. So if you're somebody who likes that caretaking trope, there is a bunch of that in this book. If you're looking for a story about two people recovering from different kinds of PTSD as well, it's such a beautiful book. So it's like lots of caretaking scenes, nicknames. I love a nickname in the book, and this book is full of them. Just soft moments. I When I first recorded this video, I was saying, oh my God, it's so cute. Oh my God, it's so cute. And oh my God. But then I realized that that is not a book review. And that is saying it's so cute over and over again is not in any way coherent. And so I apologize if I haven't done a very good job of explaining this book. But also, Martin is very emotionally constipated. And I love an emotionally constipated man when they have no choice to fully embrace all the emotions that they feel. If you like a sweet, soft, beautiful romance about two people who have been through the absolute worst, who are now getting to embark on probably one of the best love stories you've ever heard, definitely read this one. You know, they're both extremely traumatized from previous experiences, and they're just trying to come to terms with everything that they've been through and attempting to rebuild their lives. And I think for me, that probably was the most beautiful part. Seeing all the effort that they made. I love the found family that they made with the people that were around them as well. Will has incredible siblings and who are always willing to help. Martin finds, some of his family that he didn't know were family as well. It's really funny. Martin is so funny in the way that emotionally constipated characters tend to be, denying love while fully like craving everything. For Martin, everything is Will. He's a Will stan, okay, in a romantic sense. He's just so into Will, and it's beautiful to see. If you've ever felt unworthy of love because of something that has happened to you, and you're looking for a book that will help you towards your journey of healing, I definitely, without a doubt, recommend this book. Now, trying to review it I feel quite emotional. I think it speaks a lot that a fictional book can make me feel this way, honestly. Some people are just talented, and Kat Sebastian, she's one of one. In the spirit of the Bromance Book Club, which I've talked about before this, we have Isn't It Bromantic, which is the fourth book in the series. So while I hadn't read the rest of the books, I was intrigued by this one because it featured probably my favorite friend of Gavin's, who is Vlad. They play for the same team and he's Russian. And so he has a marriage of convenience to Elena, who was his childhood best friend. And so they get married because Elena has lost her father and Vlad is coming over to America to play baseball. And so he married her so that she could come with him. And so they get married, right? And they go in separate ways. Vlad goes on to play baseball, and then Elena continues her father's work because her father was a journalist and had quite a dangerous job, and he passed away as a result. And so she's basically trying to chase who murdered her father. This book is a marriage in crisis book, but it's also a second chance at romance because they knew each other as children. They never really had a chance to really delve into a proper romantic relationship. And it's a miscommunication kind of book. So maybe if that really irritates you, maybe you should avoid. But at the same time, I understood why they had the problems that they had, and I very much was rooting for them. I think have patience with Elena. Vlad is an absolute gem of a man. He is so honestly, there is nothing wrong with that man. He is the perfect man if I ever dreamt one up. He is emotionally available. He's so sweet. He's so kind. Even in his career where he could have got away with like a bunch of things that athletes are quite famous for, he didn't. He was just so loyal. He loved animals. Vlad is actually, for a long time, he was my favorite book boyfriend. I feel like some other people have taken his spot, but he's still very much top. If I was ever going to talk about my like favorite male protagonist, he would definitely be in there because he's just such a cinnamon roll and he deserves the absolute world. And so it was nice to, again, like the Bromance Book Club I mentioned, it was nice to see them all step in and really make sure that he got his girl in the end. It was just them trying to basically get a chance to like court each other and win each other over in a way that they had never had an opportunity to do before. And it was really, really sweet and I loved it. Vlad is the one that's really carrying this book though. Like if you love him, you will enjoy the book. If you don't like him, which I find it hard to believe you won't, then maybe it might not be, the best book. But I definitely recommend it. If you like a marriage in crisis trope, if you like second chance romance, if you like sweet cinnamon roll men who love romance books and have close friendships with men who actually are rooting for them to find love, then this is also like the perfect book. It's very angsty as well because actually Vlad is more so the one that's pining and having like a one-sided relationship. Elena isn't having any relationships on the side, but she's just so hyper focused on her goal of finding out what happened to her father that she loses sight of the things that are around her, almost like a one-track mind. And so it takes a lot for her to realize that Vlad has been waiting for you and he's also been suffering, even though he hasn't put that burden on you. And I just really liked, them finding each other again and having that happily ever after. So it was really sweet and I really enjoyed it. Next is Square to the Park by JJ Mulder. I'm going to leave links in the description to all of the times I've talked about this book. So I'm just going to do a quick summary. It's between Corwin and Nigel. Again, not a classic second chance romance in the sense that they never actually had a full blown relationship, nor did they even sleep together. It's just they run into each other one night and they almost sleep together, but something goes wrong. And they spend years apart. And then Nigel is transferred to Corwin's team, and then they get a chance to talk about what happened and right wrongs. And it's just a really, really beautiful book. I thought I had to mention it because it's one of my favorite books right now. JJ Mulder is one of my favorite authors right now, and so I feel like it wouldn't have felt right for me not to mention it, even though I have talked about these books in previous videos. It's still a book that makes me swoon and makes me so happy. Next is Ever After Always by Chloe Liese, and this is in the Bergman Brothers series, and it's another marriage in crisis kind of book. So this book follows Freya, who is the eldest of the Bergman siblings, and Aiden, who is her husband. They're working on a myriad of issues that they have, whether it's planning a family, dealing with having known his father growing up, and then just them not communicating after like 10 plus years of being together, and the fact that they're not at a place where they feel like they should be a decade into their marriage. I liked this book. I wouldn't say that I loved it because it did feel a tad over dramatic for me. And while I love a family story and an ensemble cast kind of story, I did feel like at times the Bergmans were a bit too in each other's business. I like a series that follows like either it's a group of friends or a family like this one, but there does come a time when the family interference is a bit much, and I feel that way about the Bergman Brothers series. It's enjoyable and I love them all. At least for the books that I've read. I've read books 1 to 5, I think. But the constant interference of the siblings does start to feel annoying at some point. I don't know if anybody has read the series and experiences it before. Like it's just a bit much, especially because they're all adults here, and I understand seeking family advice and seeking family counsel. But at the end of the day, it did start to feel a bit exhausting having them like walk in. It was fun and all, but I would have liked to see a lot less of them, if that makes any sense. Final conflict did feel like a lot because it's a book that's actually filled with a lot of conflict. So the final conflict kind of took away from the story a bit in the sense that I felt it was too much. It almost felt like conflict pile on. So I did struggle a bit with that. But what I love most is that this is a story about a mature couple. And what I mean by mature, not really strictly in terms of age, but in terms of longevity of their relationship. I really like on top of all the wealth of experience that they had, that they're still having these issues. So it felt very good to see people in a completely different stage of life, not a couple in their 20s, not a massively wealthy couple with a billionaire, not a couple who has children and the perfect life. I feel like it's the perfect book about you might have a seemingly good marriage, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep making efforts or that you don't still have, room to grow. I feel like maybe when I do a video on series, I'll talk about the Bergman Brothers series because I have a love-hate relationship with the series. And if you have read it, I would love to know your thoughts about like what your experience was, because I do know that people quite like it, but I do have my own issues with the way that this series goes down. And it's not my favorite in the series. Axel and Rooney's story is my favorite. They work through their issues and it's very deep, and it will tug at your heartstrings and you will root for them to get back together. It's not the kind of second chance romance where you're like, you guys should really break up, like you have no business being together. It felt very grown and sexy, which I really liked. So if that's your vibe, definitely pick this one up. Next we have Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren, and I read this book years ago, and it follows Macy and Elliot, who have known each other since childhood. So Macy lost her mother, I think, to cancer, and then she and her father move over to a new town, and then they meet Elliot's family. Elliot comes from a huge family. He has like lots of siblings, and so they really mesh well within the family. And then Mason and Elliot become quite close, and they have their ups and downs as teenagers of like dating other people and figuring out themselves and exploring. And that probably was my favorite part of the book, the fact that they had this entire history. And as adults, they didn't have the same level of awkwardness that you would if you were an adult meeting another adult and they were a complete stranger. There was this entire history that they had together. And so it really added some weight to the story. It made the story feel quite robust because they knew each other since childhood. They had insight into what the other person was like for a long period of time, despite the fact that they were both still quite young. So they lose touch for a while and they come back together. The only thing I struggled a bit with in this book is I hate when they have a second chance romance and one or both of them is in a relationship. I always kind of feel like the other people in their relationships almost have like the short end of the stick, in a sense that it's obvious that both Macy and Elliot are not fully over each other. And so I don't like the addition of other people in the relationship, not knowing that prior to going into a relationship with each of them. That's the only thing that kind of made me uncomfortable. But all in all, it was a book I really enjoyed. I haven't read it in recent years, but I did enjoy it for what it was. I also loved when they were teenagers, they had these awkward chats about like growing up and like sex and preferences. And it was just so cute because I feel like when you start off a relationship as friends, it kind of removes that extra level of shyness that you would have had if the person that you were meeting was a completely different, was a complete stranger. You know what I mean? Like they have this transparency between them that is very unique to people in that circumstance. It's not every time that I like a book with alternating timelines, but this was really good. The way that it was done was extremely good. And it was the kind of book that I finished in one sitting because I was just desperate to see how they would end up and what would happen. I felt like it was also age appropriate for when they were children, but also age appropriate for when they were adults. It wasn't the kind of book where they're acting like adults as children or acting as children as an adult. This would have been one of my top romances a few years ago, but I've since read other books that have overtaken its space. If you're just getting into romance, I feel like it is probably the most perfect book to start with. Maybe if you're not a reader and you happen to have stumbled into this video, I don't know how, or maybe if you're somebody who's read other genres and you're looking to get into romance, I think that this is a perfect introduction to the genre, if you ask me. It was my introduction, so I'm a bit partial to that as well. Next up, we have Happy Place by Emily Henry. I have to admit, I'm going to be completely honest with you guys right now. I don't like this book. And I know book recs are technically supposed to be about books you've enjoyed, but I feel like I've read the books. I might as well take this opportunity to talk about it. I feel like Harriet and Wynne have no business being together. It was a second chance that I don't think should have happened, in my opinion. I think that, first of all, the book was a drag to get through. I forced myself to read this book, which I'm not proud of because I think I'm a proud DNFer, but I didn't want to because I was a bit in denial because I read this book after I had read Book Lovers. And if you've seen my favorite romance books of all time videos, you know that Book Lovers is top for me. So I think it was very shocking to my system to realize that I did not like Happy Place. In fact, I hated Happy Place. And I think to come out of a romance book thinking that the couple had no business being together is quite sad because the idea of a romance book is that you're supposed to be rooting for the two characters to be together. But Harriet, in my opinion, didn't need Win. Harriet needed therapy. She needed to go and figure out herself. She needed to go on a retreat. She needed to eat, pray, love. She needed to do anything but get into a relationship with Win. It truly baffles me that people like them as a couple because he just seemed so disinterested in their relationship. Also, I never forgave him for leaving her at a point in her life where she was down and out. You know, I get that things happen with him as well, but I just don't think Win wants a relationship with Harriet the way Harriet wants a relationship with Win. And that to me could never be a good romance. Literally, the most interesting part of the book, I think, was their friend group. And even then, the friend group wasn't that great. Everybody in the friend group just had their own problems, but their own problems were even more exciting than Harriet and Win's problems. I found Harriet. I'm sad to say, but I did find both of them like pathetic and passive and just like uninspiring. Like there's nothing about any aspect of their lives that I would want. You know, Harriet feels like she just moves with the wind. Feels to me, Harriet feels extremely directionless in all facets of her life. She doesn't know who she is. She doesn't know what she wants to do. She makes drastic decisions out of thin air. She is a chronic people pleaser. I just think Harriet, it's not when you were missing, it's therapy. Like somebody just needed to tell her that. Therapy to get over like her family's expectations, therapy to figure out what the hell she wants to do in life, therapy not to make rash decisions about your career, therapy to not stay in a friend group when you're clearly the only person that's wanting to keep this friend group together. I didn't feel like they grew. I feel like they regressed, which is even worse. Like, you know, the thing about Emily Henry is towards the end, she has these moments where they have heart to heart, and it makes you feel like the couple has an epic love story. But it also happened in People We Meet on Vacation, where I was just thinking, I actually do not, in fact, want you guys to be together. And it doesn't matter that you've said these amazing words to each other towards the end of the book. I don't believe in your love story. It happened with Poppy and Alex. It happened here with Harriet and Win. I have to keep looking at Win because I never remember his name because he felt very cardboardy to me. At first, I thought they needed couples therapy, but I realized Harriet needs therapy. And then when she gets therapy, she's going to realize that she should go and find someone that is not Win. That's pretty much it. I got no happy feelings from Happy Place, which is quite a travesty. I think there was a scene where they go high. I skipped that because I just couldn't be asked at that point, and I was forcing myself, and I was like, you know, I'm tired. I know I'm the only reason I'm recommending this book is because I know people like it. I just didn't happen to like it. But if you have like an alternative viewpoint, you want to sell me this book, by all means, please do it. I love to hear an opinion. I specifically like to hear about an opinion when I've not liked a popular book, and a lot of people have. The vibes were not immaculate in this book, I'll tell you that. The vibes were not giving. It was giving go your separate ways. It was giving I don't know why you're together. It was giving nothing it needed to give. And the last on my list is The Roommate Risk by Talia Hibbert. If you know anything about me, you know I love Talia Hibbert. I have 3 of her books here, which tells you everything you need to know because I don't own physical books that I don't love. And so I read this book on a whim, and it's between Jasmine and Raoul, who were college friends. So they're best friends basically, but they slept together in college. So Jasmine has never been a relationship kind of girl, while Raoul has been secretly in love with Jasmine for the better part of their entire friendship. And so he has a problem with her house, and she moves into his spare bedroom, and then the relationship blossoms from there basically. And then they go on this entire journey of, you know, admitting their romantic love for each other, and then exploring why Jasmine hasn't previously wanted a relationship. Jasmine actually reminds me a lot of Danny from Take a Hint, Danny Brown, which is one of my all-time favorite romances, and Danny, who is one of my favorite female protagonists of all time. She reminds me of Danny, just sweet and loving, but emotionally burned. So they're afraid of taking that plunge to love. And Roll is very similar to Zaf. It's the kind of book where if you've read Take a Hint, Danny Brown, and you're feeling a bit of like, and you're feeling a bit depressed because you think you'll never find a book like it, you should probably read The Roommate Risk. It was very sweet. It was so hot. Talia Hibbert, she's one of the best authors at writing spice. She's that girl. There's a very almost like no bullshit quality to the way that she writes sex scenes. I love the way that she does representation. She does representation in the least ostentatious way possible. It just feels the way that it does in real life. This is somebody's reality, and they're trying to find love because they deserve it, even though the world has at times tried to make it look like they don't. And for me, that's why I love her characters specifically. It's like they make no apologies for who they are. They have this air of I deserve to be in the world and treated exactly like the people who don't have these problems. And I love that element of the way that she writes, the way that her characters' problems are not their entire personality. Her characters feel fully fleshed and robust and like whole people coming together. And I think that probably is the secret to Talia Hibbert's writing. She's just incredible at constructing the most lovable characters with the most beautiful stories, and it's truly amazing. So I definitely would recommend. It's not a classic, like I said, second chance romance, but for me it is. And if you're the kind of person who considers the kind of things that I consider second chance romances, this will definitely apply. Thank you so much for sticking to the end of this video. I'm very much looking forward to delving into more tropes, and if you would like to see that, please like, comment, and subscribe because it really helps me and it really helps my channel. Also, feel free to critique. I'm only about, I would say, I'm only about 4 months into creating content, so I'm still very much new. So any critique I think would be appreciated. What are the things I could do better? What would you like to see? You know, how are the reviews working? Do you think I give enough background into these books? Do I need to improve with descriptions? Things like that. I would really appreciate. I love healthy constructive criticism. I'm not opposed. I think constructive criticism is how you grow, really. And I really, really enjoy feedback. So yeah, thank you so much for watching till the end, and I'll see you next time. Bye. Yeah.